right there. I'm Randy Cross, and this is Unsafe Spaces, our fourth season of this existence, and this is our fourth episode. I want to thank you for joining us. Going to be a pretty quick, pretty clean experience this week. We will not have a interview. If you'd like to rewatch, I'd appreciate you rewatching the interview from last week with Dr. John Crary. Some fantastic stuff in there about research when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases and whatnot. Good stuff. You can find it at unsafespacesusa.com or randycross.com for that interview. Hey, so this weekend was just over. Atlanta did an amazing job on Super Bowl 53. The restaurants were full. The venues were full. The streets were full. The cars were nose to butt. They were everywhere. But all things considered, I guess the biggest complaint coming out of Atlanta was getting out of Atlanta. Yesterday at the airport was a little bit of a nightmare, but that's okay. But we did have one thing that happened that normally happens at Super Bowl cities. We had protests, and it didn't matter what you were protesting. If you had a cause and you had a sign, you had a shot. There were some that were kind of conventional. They were about free speech. There were some that were about religion. There were some that were about weed. There were some that were about pro-life. There were some that were about abortion. There were some that were about war and anti-war. And it was a little bit of everything. But there were a few that got my attention. And these are specifically a couple of shots here that happened right down by CNN, McCormick and Schmidt's, the restaurant. And this was a group of guys that were out there about circumcision. My man, you got people's attention. I'm not sure they really understood what the hell you were doing, but you were out there. There were these guys. I drove by them coming in Monday. Drove by them again Wednesday. Drove by them again Friday. Saw people on the streets that were telling me I was going to hell, telling me about every Bible verse known to man. In New Orleans on Super Bowl Sunday, they had this protest. The Dat Nation decided that the NFL needed a little reminder again that their officials had blown that game. These people have a couple of really nice things going for them. One, they got a pretty good sense of humor. Two, they got a really happening sense of style. A little bit of everything. I mean, you got to say, got a little mini Pope working, got the jacket and the gold, got a little Sesame Street going with the epaulets. That's sharp. That's some good-looking stuff. But New Orleans was not happy. And they not only protested in the streets, huge billboards, all thanks to my man Matt, whoever Matt is, don't know, believes in the cause, Saints fan, out several $1,000s if billboard costs are what billboard costs are most places. Matt's got an issue. Now, this guy was just a reminder out there. You know, when you were around Centennial Park, there were plenty of these guys. Jesus was a refugee. Okay, cool. Put this guy right next to all those people that were telling me I was going to hell. The world was about to end. And that life, as we know it, was about to stop. And didn't he know we've got 12 years? What's her name said 12 years. So I'm going with 12 years. I don't know about those guys. But I want to show you a couple signs you didn't see and things you didn't see. Start with Clint Eastwood, known as sort of a grumpy old guy. So I guess we should get along really well. Can't wait until morals and intelligence become a trend again. There's something to be said for this, especially if you've paid any attention to the news the last few weeks. Mother Teresa, a saint, had this to say about not only abortion, but about children and infanticide and other things. You've heard that word infanticide quite a bit. Mother Teresa had this take. I didn't see a whole lot of that over the weekend on the streets, but then again, that's way, way too wordy for a sign and makes way, way too much sense. But if you have paid attention of the news, this next one really sums up kind of where we're at right now. We're going to tax 90% for the rich. Everything's going to be socialized. We're going to socialize our medicine. We're going to socialize everything. We're going to tax everybody because that's socialism, and it works out so well. But that picture right there, you got to explain to me what's wrong about that picture, because every single flippin' time socialism happens, that happens. Every time. Thank you. That'll do it for my rant of the day. Time now for Unsafe Spaces Sports. All right, Unsafe Spaces Sports. We got 3 quick hits here in the sports section, things that kind of tickled my fancy. First of all, the obvious sports story of the week was the Atlanta big game. You got to say big game or you get in trouble. So it was a big game. It was Sunday. It was 6:30. Almost a record number of people didn't watch that game. It was under 100 million, unfortunately, for CBS. They did an unbelievable job on it. The broadcast was really good. The problem was the game wasn't. And I don't care what anybody says. When you get a game that's the lowest scoring game in the history of the Super Bowl, when it's 13-3, that means there's not much excitement. That means there's not much action. And there's, the biggest action in the game was the fact that these two specifically, and they had a lot of help, did the equivalent of choking on a piece of steak at a restaurant. They needed the Heimlich during the course of the Super Bowl. Only when you're in a restaurant and you choke and somebody gives you the Heimlich, it's over in a couple seconds. They had to go through this for 3.5 hours, and it was torture to watch these guys because they did. No one likes to talk about choking and gagging. The Rams gagged on the Super Bowl. Biggest moment, biggest game. If there's a God in their life, they'll get lucky and maybe get back. I don't really care about who won. I don't care about who lost. I do care when the game sucks. And I'm sorry. That was not fun to watch. I've listened to a lot of sports commentators. Oh, that was compelling. You know what? If it was so compelling, why didn't you geniuses and experts have a defensive player for MVP? Anybody got a thought? Dante Hightower had 2 sacks. You had guys play unbelievable between interceptions and big tackles and sacks. You had every reason. 13-3, that's a defensive game. Got to be a defensive MVP, right? No, little wide receiver. You people have not only no imagination, you don't know much about the game. But, again, that's just me. All right, something else happened. Might have happened Saturday that was an air ball in your life. But one of the all-time great golfers and probably the best commentator to ever do this on TV, Johnny Miller. He's from Napa, California. Wonderful guy. I've had the pleasure of not only knowing him, golfing with him, but on occasion actually getting a chance to work around him. He did his last broadcast for NBC at the Waste Management Open down in Scottsdale. This is somebody you're going to miss on TV. Brutally honest, always sparring and at odds with the guys that play professional golf because he calls them out on their stuff. And for me, that's something that's really fun to watch when it comes to golf. I'm going to miss Johnny Miller. Johnny, thank you so much for everything. It was fun. You were fun. Have a great retirement as a grandfather up at Silverado up in Napa. Enjoy. All right, there's a sporting event happening now that Super Bowl's done. You're not going to want to miss the whole thing around it. NASCAR does things a little differently. The NFL, it starts in July, it ends in February, and it ends with the Super Bowl. NASCAR takes that and turns it around. NASCAR starts with the Super Bowl. NASCAR's first race of the year, the Daytona 500, the great American race. It's going to be down there in Florida, and it's going to be something. I guess I am told the big news of the year is that the Fords, instead of being that kind of Taurus Focus kind of looking car, are going to look like Mustangs. Okay. So all those idiots speeding around the streets in the lime green Mustangs now can say they drive a NASCAR-like car. All right, compensate much? I don't know. Yeah, but Daytona's going to happen. That is a fun race to watch on TV. I'm not telling you watch the whole 500 miles because I'm not that big a fan. But I will tell you, the first 50 miles and the last 50 miles is must-see TV because they are getting it. They're either getting it at the beginning or they're getting it at the end. And it also has one of my favorite sports terms there is. And it's a NASCAR-only term. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Because if you ain't rubbing, you ain't racing. Only in NASCAR. All right, that'll do it for Unsafe Spaces Sports. Time now for a tongue-in-cheek version of the Wambulance news story.
Better grab your blankie and just squeeze it real tight. These people need to get a real life.
Yeah, there was a news story this week about an Indian man in Mumbai that sued his parents for having birthed him without his consent. When you first saw the story, you brushed over it and went, yeah, that kind of sounds like a news story today. People are kind of that dumb. Then you look into it, might be a little tongue-in-cheek, but how typical of right now is this story? I mean, this should be the new millennial poster boy. What were you thinking? You're forced to have a career. You forced me into this world. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for all this student debt. I didn't ask for all this conflict in my life. I didn't ask for all this pressure to succeed. Oh, gosh. Yeah, the little kid over on the left. That was me when I heard the story. And later on, I really enjoyed going through all of this and seeing the rest of this story. Talk about get a real life. A lot of us should get a real life. All right, time for our feel-good story of the week. And when you're watching this, don't think bacon. Yeah, a lot of the times here on Unsafe Spaces, we do feel-good pet stories. We got dog stories and cat stories and chicken stories and lizard stories and snake stories. But we never hear about really nice little porcine stories. Yeah, pigs. Cuddly? Eh, not really. Food? At times. Pets? I don't think of them as pets personally. But I'm not like this guy, and I'd be wrong.
We believe he just ran off from some farm.
He ran for miles while he was attacked by dogs. He eventually collapsed on a very busy highway.
He was pretty messed up when I met him the first time. It was heartbreaking because this large 500-pound pig was in a small dog kennel. Just sitting with him, that just calmed down a lot. He pretty much put his head on my leg and found some comfort, somebody with him. I knew that I have to take him with me.
We want to help farm animals just because There are so many dog and cat rescues, but very few who are set up and able to help farm animals.
He went through so much pain in the past, and when we let him out of the stall and he saw the first time grass, he was like a little puppy because he had never seen grass. Very, very special just because we spent so much time in the beginning when he was so sick, and I was sleeping there in the barn from time to time just to watch him. We have a special bond. If you have something like Toby where he was so sick for so long, you just create a special bond. He's just permanently glued to my butt. He's just running up behind me, giving me hints where we're going and what we are checking out next. Two weeks later, that was where he actually started really moving around, where some of his wounds were healed and he started communicating a little bit more.
He's a talker. He has complaining runs, happy runs. Right now he's content.
See that mentally he's back and he's not fearful anymore. He's enjoying that he is in a safe place. When I sit out there and he is in front of me in the grass or goes into the pond, just going swimming and doing what pig's supposed to do, that's the most rewarding part, actually. Just because of this behavior, I just love him to death. He's a child on a man.
Oh, well, good for him. Hey, if you get a chance and this story interests you, Blind Spot Animal Sanctuary. Google it, put a .com at the end of it, Blind Spot Animal Sanctuary. Hey, check it out. They're doing some pretty nice work. I want to thank you for viewing this week's podcast and remind you where you find this podcast. You get it on Twitter, you get it on Facebook, you get it on iTunes, you can find it on SoundCloud. You go to unsafespacesUSA.com, go to randycross.com. Any thoughts, any suggestions, producer at unsafespacesUSA.com. And technically it's still winter, though it's going to be 68 today and 75 on Thursday here in Atlanta. And let's do a little bit more sliding in the ice version of Happy Trails.